For reasons that utterly escape everyone involved, you're listening to a bipolar, a schizophrenic, and a podcast. Here are your hosts, Gabe Howard and Michelle Hammer.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of A Bipolar, a Schizophrenic, and a Podcast. My name is Gabe. I am the bipolar one.
And hi, I'm Michelle, the schizophrenic one, I guess. It's gotta be.
Yes. It's the only one left. I mean, it's simple. It's math. I mean, how many times have you screamed that? It's just math!
I've never, ever screamed that in my life, but sure, Gabe, whatever you want to do.
I happen to know that in another episode involving a police officer, you screamed at her, "It's just math! I'm the only one left!"
No. I said process of elimination! Process of elimination.
Isn't process of elimination just math?
I guess so, but she was still an idiot and didn't know that.
I don't mean to bring up traumatic things in your past, although that was a great episode, and I really encourage people to look in the show notes and find that episode and check it out. But we want to talk about how, the things that happen to people with mental illness, they're not always fair. Like, for example, as you told the story, you were having an episode. You were having the symptoms of schizophrenia. You were experiencing psychosis, and they sent the police to you. Could you imagine if you broke your leg and the police showed up?
No, that would be absolutely absurd. But yeah, the cops did show up. Well, one cop showed up, and instead of, helping me, she decided to beat the crap out of me until I was brought to the hospital because she couldn't figure out which one was the guilty one,
And it's good that you were brought to the hospital. For you, in that situation, it started off poorly, but it ended up with you in the hospital. And again, we don't have to tell the whole story again. We already did an episode on it. But you didn't go to jail.
No, I did not go to jail.
And for many people, that's not the case.
Well, I didn't end up dead, which is better. Because a lot of times you call the cops, the person that just ends up dead.
A lot of times is probably unfair to policing in America, but sometimes it does happen. And we have stories about this. And really, the number should be 0. 0 people who are experiencing a disease, an illness, a disorder, who are not well. 0 people should end up in prison or arrested or on trial or dead. I mean, that's fair, right?
I completely agree with you on that one, that's for sure.
You were alluding to something very specific. Tell the audience what you're talking about, because I think some people are going to hear, what do you mean somebody with mental illness ends up dead because of seeking help?
Just last week, May 2019, there's a woman in Texas, her name is Pamela Turner. A cop approached her, it was all caught on social media. A cop approached her, she actually had outstanding warrants, but everybody in the community, they all knew that she had mental health issues, and she was actually schizophrenic. And a cop approached her, started arguing with her, she was resisting arrest, and he began to tase her. And in the scuffle, she grabbed his taser and started to tase him. And what he did to retaliate was take out his gun, and he shot 5 times, and one of them hit her, and she ended up dead. Does that seem reasonable to you?
None of it seems reasonable. I think that it's unfair for all sides. I think that it is completely unreasonable of our society to expect police officers to be first responders for mental health crises. I mean, think about that for a moment. Could you imagine if your house got robbed and society said, okay, we're going to send a doctor? No police or law enforcement training whatsoever, but doctors now investigate crimes. Because that's what happens. We expect police officers to deal with this, and when things go wrong, we're like, stupid police.
Yeah.
But at the same time, oh my God!
I mean...
Oh my God!
What kind of cop gets their taser taken away from them? I mean, what kind of cop is tasing a woman anyway? And they said she was just resisting arrest, but she was also schizophrenic, obviously mentally ill. They said everybody in the complex, everybody in the area, they all knew she had schizophrenia. They knew there was mental health issues. But a cop gets his taser taken away? I mean, what kind of cop are you? They said he was an 11-year veteran cop. Like, what kind of cop gets their taser ripped out of their hand? Like, come on, dude. And then your retaliation, 5 shots? Really? Really, 5 shots. They have your taser. There's a much better way to handle that. You don't need to fire 5 shots. And then one hits her? Like, bad aim, dude.
You said a lot of things there. And what I really want you and our listeners to focus on is the frustration in your voice. The reality is that we weren't there. It's unreasonable to say things like, he fired 5 shots. What kind of a cop gets his taser taken away? How did he not know that she was mentally ill? Cops aren't magic. They're not clairvoyant. You can respect that.
Yeah.
What I'm responding to is, I'm mentally ill. What happens if I have a mental health issue and somebody tries to get me help and I end up dead?
Yeah, this isn't the only issue, though. Do you know what happened in October 2016 to Debra Danner? Have you heard that story in New York City in the Bronx?
I have not.
She was actually also a Fountain House member before I was ever a member there. She had some multiple episodes. The cops had been called on her before, but nothing ever really big happened. But on one day, the cops were called. She was in there with her sister and a cop. And first she was wielding scissors. They said, don't wield those scissors, put those away. So she put the scissors away and she comes out with a bat. Now, the thing is, did she swing the bat or did she not swing the bat? But what had happened was as soon as she has the bat in her hand, the cop shot her dead. And what happened after that is when it was brought to trial, the cop was acquitted and not found guilty of it. But the city of New York gave the family $2 million.
I always struggle with this one as a citizen. I don't think that we should charge police officers with mistakes that happen on the job. We don't charge doctors. If a doctor makes a mistake and kills their patient, we don't try them for murder. I'm not saying that what the police
not
officer
Michael
did was right or
Jackson's
wrong.
doctor. Michael Jackson's doctor went to jail.
Well, but Michael Jackson's doctor wasn't making a split-second choice in the moment.
True.
He was continuously doing this against medical advice. Yeah, there's a lot there. I don't want to set this up as police officers versus people with mental illness because I really see it as damaging to both sides. I have talked to many police officers over the last 10 years doing crisis intervention team training. That's where I train police officers on how to better help people who are having psychosis, depression, schizophrenia symptoms, bipolar symptoms, and their families in desperation call the police. And the police officers all say the same thing. Why are we here? Why are we being called? Why can't medical people go? But medical people won't go.
But I don't understand how holding a bat equals getting shot in the chest.
Listen, I'm not a police officer. How can I answer that?
But
I don't understand how graphic files are in layers. It's one picture. But you tell me week after week after week, that's 7, and you say assets. What the fuck is an asset? All I see is a logo. There's not 7 assets, Michelle. I don't understand that.
It doesn't make any sense that the cop would be found not guilty, but then the city of New York would pay her family $2 million.
Oh, you're completely wrong about that. Civil trials and criminal trials are 2 completely separate things that have nothing to do with one another.
But he's not guilty, but they gave her family money? Then
Right,
they know they did wrong.
Why? That doesn't mean anything. This is just accord and satisfaction under the law. It might be easier just to pay the settlement and admit no guilt than on and on and on. For example, if you run into my car and you get arrested for manslaughter, you're like, look, it was just an accident. I couldn't stop on time. My brakes were bad. So you get acquitted of manslaughter. But then you have to pay my family for damaging my car and accidentally killing me. Right?
But
you can accidentally...
They got $2 million.
I don't care if they got $80 billion. Mistakes are not illegal, nor should they be. Do you want mistakes to be illegal? Because the next time you make a mistake, you could go to prison for that mistake.
I don't know. I think the city knows something wasn't right.
Knowing that something's not right and something illegal occurring are very different. Michelle, sincerely, if you and I are walking down the street and I trip you, that's not right. But if it was an accident, you're going to forgive me. But I would know that I did something wrong. I accidentally got my giant boot in your way and you fell on the ground. And I owe you new jeans and I owe you an apology. It doesn't mean that I assaulted you. It means that my big fat boot got in your way because I walked too close.
I don't think it's an accident to shoot a woman.
That's literal nonsense.
How?
What you are doing, and I'm being sincere, what you are saying is that police officers are targeting mentally ill people on purpose to assassinate us.
I'm not saying they're targeting. I'm just saying that the officer thought that she was completely out of her mind, and he felt threatened by this bat, which was not swung. It was a whole thing that she did not swing the bat, and his retaliation was to shoot her. Do you think this woman, 66-year-old woman, he believed he was in danger This man couldn't take a bat away from a 66-year-old woman?
Again,
He had to shoot her and not just take the bat? He couldn't fight this 66-year-old woman to take the bat out of her arm? Don't you think that would have been better?
That's a good point. You've completely convinced me. I agree with you 100%.
Thank you, Gabe.
And you couldn't peacefully go with the police officer? You had to attack her?
No, she attacked me. Well, I said very politely to her, I'd like to show you in my bedroom. Can we do that?
Well, he said very politely, put the bat down. This is the problem, Michelle. Every time you tell a story, you're blaming law enforcement. It doesn't matter. You are always right and law enforcement is always wrong. That is not a message that we as people living with mental illness want out in the public. That's not right, and police officers will not respond to that.
Well, there has to be a better way to deal with it, Gabe. How can we deal with it?
That I agree with. And that's what I'm trying to say. I think we're both fucked. I think that both sides are fucked. We're just trying to hash out this idea that many people living with mental illness believe that law enforcement is out to get them. And that means that we don't have help. And many law enforcement police officers don't know how to help us. You know why they don't know how to help us?
Training?
Yeah, they don't have any training. They are told to come out and help us with zero training.
Hold up, we gotta hear from our sponsor.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp.com. Secure, convenient, and affordable online counseling. All counselors are licensed, accredited professionals. Anything you share is confidential. Schedule secure video or phone sessions, plus chat and text with your therapist whenever you feel it's needed. A month of online therapy often costs less than a single traditional face-to-face session. Go to BetterHelp.com/Psych Central and experience 7 days of free therapy to see if online counseling is right for you. BetterHelp.com/Psych Central.
And we're back trying to correct the systemic flaw between the way that police officers see mental illness and the way mental illness really is.
We're all in this fucked up boat, but why is nobody trying to resolve it? I remember actually in my disciplinary meeting after that cop thing, the cop did come on the phone. We had to call her and hear her version of the story. And she said that our situation was beyond any crisis training she ever had.
Now, I know you said that kind of in a an angry, mocking, way, but think about that. Remove all of your emotion and consider that for a moment. The person that was sent to help you received no crisis training.
She said it was beyond the crisis training she ever learned.
Right?
I'm just wondering what kind of crisis training she ever learned.
Zero. None. People think I'm making this up. People believe that police officers are going through all of this training. They're not. In the best case scenario, they get a 1-week course. Could you imagine if your doctor that prescribed your birth control had a 1-week course on women's biology? Would you go to a gynecologist that had a 1-week course?
Well, I hope I never went to a gynecologist that had a 1-week course. That'd be ridiculous.
Okay, but the police officers that are going to be called to help us, 1-week course.
That's ridiculous.
It's completely ridiculous, and that's why we have to work with police officers because, listen, nobody's going to listen to people with mental illness. That's what's messed up. We can say, look, we're dying, we're being killed, we're scared, we're going to prison and to jail because of the symptoms of mental illness. Why is nobody trying to make serious systemic changes? Why can't a police officer and a social worker come out? Why can't a social worker come out? Why can't police officers receive more than 1 week of training since they're the first responders for mental health crises?
And
why?
There's so many mentally ill people in jail, it's unreal how much they're not even being treated, too. I feel like if, God forbid, something happened and I'm in jail right now, they wouldn't even give me my medicine. Can you imagine how I'd be acting in jail without my medicine?
And not only would you be acting that way because you don't have your medication, but all of the crimes that you committed in prison or jail while off your medications, you'd be tried as if you were perfectly fine. Mm-hmm. Even though we know that these are symptoms of schizophrenia, you are unmedicated because of the behavior of the state, you would still be held responsible for those medications. Now, these are extreme cases. Ladies and gentlemen, please understand that we're giving worst case scenarios. Often this works out okay, but often isn't good enough. Let's say that it's 50-50. 50% of the time, people like me and Michelle get the right treatment. What about the other 50%? And the thing that really upsets me is the more money you have, the more likely it is you are to be treated fairly. The better neighborhood you live in, the more likely these police officers are to have training. The more wealth that you have accumulated, the more likely you parents are to drive you to a crisis stabilization unit rather than call the police. And if you don't have a support system, if you aren't Gabe and Michelle and you don't have mothers who love them, you're just all on your own, and somebody who calls the police doesn't even know you.
Yeah. I mean, if you're screaming and hollering in your own apartment, your neighbor's going to call the cops on you, and who knows what's going to happen then.
Yeah, and the police are going to knock on the neighbor's door, and the neighbor's going to say, I hate that woman. She screams all the time. And that person's going to be upset. At least when your family calls the police, they say, this is my daughter, and I love her, and I don't know why she won't calm down. And police officers are influenced by this. They're human. They're tired. You get a police officer with no training at the end of a double shift with a woman screaming and swinging a bat, bad shit's gonna happen.
She didn't swing the bat. She didn't even swing the bat.
And that just makes it all the worse because we know after the dust settled, after an investigation occurred, we know how sick that woman was. And, look, we can't get the police officer on the show, but I can't imagine that this guy feels good about it.
She wasn't a criminal. She was sick.
Exactly. And we are criminalizing mental illness in this country. And we have to do something about this. We just have to. Because many, 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 many people feel what Michelle is modeling. Everybody's like, well, that's crazy. Nobody thinks that. Everybody thinks that. This is a traumatized group of sick people that feel the police are out to get them. I would venture to guess that half of our listeners feel this way right now, and they're like, dear God, Gabe, let Michelle go. This is how we feel. But that's not going to work, because that's just an us versus them mentality. And if we're fighting each other, nobody's solving the problem.
Not at all.
I don't even think anybody's looking into the problem personally. We know how many mentally ill people are in prisons and jails. Nobody cares. We know how many mentally ill people are homeless.
I've seen lockup. There are so many people in jail with mental illness, and when they do something, this guy was cutting himself all over his arms. There was blood everywhere all over his cell. He's done it multiple times, and they're saying that he doesn't have an issue. He just wants to get out of, his cell and go into the psych ward that's in the hospital, and he wants a different change of scenery. There's nothing really wrong with him. And I'm watching this going, this jail is awful. They see what this guy's doing to himself, and they're saying he wants attention, and he wants a different change of scenery. This is awful. This is awful. Why are they even putting this in the show? Because this makes the jail look terrible. This is bad on the jail, not bad on the guy. What they're showing is awful.
And that's what's so sad. The fact that it made it to a mainstream show and the fact that nobody realized that it made the jail look bad makes us realize, people living with mental illness, the people who have this burden, that the average citizen out there thinks it's all our fault.
Yeah.
They think that we, the sick people, have to change the way the police and the way that medication is handed out and the way that the mental health safety net, it's all on us. People with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, psychosis, people who are very, very sick also have to create sweeping reform across the nation on the way that mental health treatment is done in America. And we're the ones that are crazy?
I know. Everyone talks about how we have to help people with mental illness because they're just so violent, but then they're not helping anybody.
That's what I love the most. Every time there's a shooting, we always say mental illness, mental illness, mental illness, mental illness, mental illness. Okay, are we going to fund the mental health safety net to make sure that people who are mentally ill get the treatment that they need? No.
Nope. Not at all.
Well,
nope.
So it just goes to show you that politicians at large don't actually believe that people with mental illness are responsible for this violence because they're not putting any resources into stopping the scourge of mental illness. They're just letting it go.
And all these shootings, they're all done by men. So really, we gotta stop all men. Stop being men from being born because men are doing all the shootings. It's not mentally ill people. It's men. Come on. Let's be real, Gabe. It's men.
And that's, of course,
the problem
what's
is men.
to me.
The problem is men. Let's fix men.
This is what I love, Michelle. People listening to this right now are like, wow, that woman's an idiot, blaming all men for shooting. But I bet 5 minutes ago when we blamed all mentally ill people, the people like, that tracks. You can just blame an entire group for the behavior of this teeny tiny portion, unless they're men. Then you're an idiot.
Yeah.
You replace men with any other word, you're a genius. You replace men with minorities, Muslims, feminists, just mentally ill people. All of a sudden, you're a genius that's speaking truth to power. But if you blame it on white men with guns, you stereotyping bitch.
I'm sorry,
Why
Gabe.
could you?
Haven't all the shooters been men?
I mean, yeah.
Come on. It's all men. So really, Gabe, you're at risk of being a shooter because you're a man.
And of course, people hearing that would think that's nonsense, right?
Yes.
But now...
It sounds crazy.
Now say it the other way. Change man to mentally ill. Say the exact same sentence, and we'll see how people hear it.
Now, Gabe, you're at risk of being a shooter because you're mentally ill.
Yeah, and half of society's like, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So you went from being a moron for stereotyping me for being male to being a genius for stereotyping me for being mentally ill.
Absolutely.
And this is what we have to change about our society. And it's going to take more than a bunch of mentally ill people, frankly, dying. It's going to take more than a bunch of mentally ill people being locked up in jails and prisons. It's going to take more than any of this. We need the help of law enforcement, of social workers, of the medical establishment, of our families, our friends, and we need strangers to understand that people with mental illness, we don't have any power. We're sick.
Therapy needs to be free, psychiatrist needs to be free, and psych meds need to be free. It's ridiculous.
Well, now you're sounding like a socialist, you crazy whore.
It's true, though. If there's such a problem with mental health, make all of those things free.
You're not going to get any arguments from me, but the minute you start talking about how to help people, people start screaming socialism. You know what else is socialistic? Roads, parks, schools, police officers, teachers. But helping sick people, that's the kind of socialism that we just don't need.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right.
Michelle, sincerely, we've bantered back and forth. We've played devil's advocate, and I think we've really touched a lot of nerves about how many of our listeners feel, because it feels like it's us against them. So Michelle, if you were in a room full of police officers right now, law enforcement officers, politicians, just whomever, and these are good people. They got into law enforcement because they want to save lives and help people, and they're tired of this happening too. And Michelle Hammer is standing in the front of the room, and everybody in that room is like, what do we do to help people with mental illness have better outcomes? What do you say?
What I would say is if you're in a situation where someone's having some sort of psychotic episode, you really need to de-escalate the situation and not try to make it worse with violence of some sort. So if a police officer walks into a situation where there is somebody having some sort of psychotic episode, they really need to de-escalate the situation and not try to bring on any type of violence, because that's really not going to help. You got to really talk it out, calm them down.
I know that the threat of violence is what police officers are worried about. And I understand. Look at all the pop culture. Remember that movie that we talked about several episodes back where this was just a person minding their own business, and they found out that because they were on psychiatric medications, all of your friends were like, are you violent, Michelle?
Yep.
These were your friends. Like, these are people that are sitting in your apartment watching your TV on your stolen Netflix accounts, and they wanted to know if you were violent. So I understand why police officers think that violence is around every corner when it comes to people with mental illness. Would you tell them to think of you and your life and how well you are because you got the right help, and that it's possible that they can do that for the person that they're standing in front of?
Oh, absolutely.
How do we get people to see mentally ill people as potential rather than risk?
I think we need to show police officers, we could share our own stories of what we've gone through with police officers and let them kind of know what was wrong, what was right, what should have been done differently, and what can happen when a mentally ill person is, has a support system, gets medicated, has doctors and things like that. If you run into a situation with someone psychotic, that's where you can take that person and bring them somewhere where they can get help, not jail. Bring them somewhere where they can get help.
A big message that we need to leave our first responders with is that they see us at our worst. Police officers never knock on my door and tell me that I can get louder. They always knock on my door and tell me to not be as loud. They never pull me over and tell me that I'm an excellent driver. They always pull me over and tell me that I'm speeding. And they never come into contact with people living with mental illness when we're doing well. They only come into contact with us when something bad happened. They see us at our worst. And I wish that we could have so many more conversations so that police officers could see Gabe Howard now and Michelle Hammer now. And all of us who are just minding our own business, living our lives, and we're kind of boring now. I mean, Gabe and Michelle aren't. Gabe and Michelle are awesome, but once you reach recovery, you just go on and do normal stuff, and then nobody ever sees us again because there's no reason to see us. But man, the minute something goes wrong...
You know, Gabe, wellness is so private and crisis is so public, which is just so unfortunate right now.
It is. And that's why we have to be vocal and we have to advocate for ourselves and we have to use our voices to show both sides of what it's like to live with mental illness. Crisis doesn't need any help. We've already established that. The media's got that covered. But wellness, there's a lot of people who are living well. Use your voice.
Be the voice.
Michelle, are you ready to get out of here?
I'm so ready.
All right, everybody, here is what we need you to do. It's very simple. First, wherever you downloaded this podcast, leave us a little review and as many stars as humanly possible. Second, go over to psychcentral.com/BSP, find the little graphic that says, do you have any questions? Submit your questions, your comments, or anything else. If you want to send us a novel, that's fine. We'll try to read it. Send it over to show@psychcentral.com. And finally, last but not least, share this everywhere. This is a show created by people living with mental illness for people living with mental illness. So please share it on your wall, share it in your private groups, share it everywhere. We will see everybody next Monday. Thank you.
Training!
You've been listening to a bipolar, a schizophrenic, and a podcast. If you love this episode, don't keep it to yourself. Head over to iTunes or your preferred podcast app to subscribe, rate, and review. To work with Gabe, go to GabeHoward.com. To work with Michelle, go to schizophrenic.nyc. For free mental health resources and online support groups, head over to PsychCentral.com. The show's official website is PsychCentral.com/BSP. You can email us at show@PsychCentral.com. Thank you for listening and share widely.